Welcome to this episode of Meet the Artist at Frame for Hour. My name is Ben Kusold, and in this episode I'll be speaking with Sydney Padua. Sydney is a bit of a multi-talent. She animates both 2D and 3D extremely well, and she's also an award-winning author. Her graphic novel, The Thrilling Adventures of Lovelace and Babbage, spent more than 6 months on the New York Times best-selling list. She's worked on projects including The Iron Giant, Lion King, John Carter, Open Season, The Golden Compass, and many, many more. She also has a very honest outlook on how one would go about both working in the industry while pursuing own ambitions and projects on the side, and she's very inspiring. I had an amazing conversation with her, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it as well. Also, if you're an animator looking for community and feedback and like-minded peers, come check out frameforward.io. We have great artists, great vibes, and customized animation player and animation feedback tools, all freely available at frameforward.io. And now, here's Sydney Padua.
If you have a personal project you've always wanted to do it. Do the crap version. Like, when I sat to do the comic, it was the crap version. It was horrible drawing. I would write it like literally at 1 a.m. and then just post it at 1:30 in the morning. To actually make something, even if it's terrible, you're putting something out there, and now there's material.
Yeah.
And then material can start to build. But so long as this stuff is just in your head,
yeah,
you've got something to build on. It's you've got to put stuff out there.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah, we were just talking about I met you first at the animation workshop where you taught us a creature class. It was 2D, and I guess that was your beginning as well to all of this, right?
Yeah, I started in 2D. I guess I started animating in I automatically start with 2D. It was in fact 1995 was my first professional gig. So,
and I
say a lie. I actually the first thing I did would have been in the early 90s, like 91 or something like that. I did ink and paint on a National Film Board short, like actual ink and paint on celluloid. Yeah, that's how old I am.
That's amazing. And then your I know which one your first big feature was, but was there any before that one?
I did. Before I presume you're thinking of Iron Giant.
Yeah. I wanted to build a bit of suspense because it's a pretty big deal.
That was the film before that Warner Brothers did was Quest for Camelot, and I was on that for about a month, I think, or 2. Yeah, before we rolled over onto Iron Giant.
Nice. And how long were you on Iron Giant for? Because that's quite a while.
Yeah, that I was from one end of production to the other, so I guess that would have been a year and a bit in animation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was all at Warner, right?
Yeah, that was Warner's feature animation. They sort of came and went. They made 3 films. I think they did Quest for Camelot, Iron Giant, and Osmosis Jones. And that was it. And they decided they didn't want to do animation anymore.
Is that how you? I don't wanna put too much on you, but I just I did a little bit of research, and it seems a little bit like you, as many of us kind of pushed, like we had a computer forced onto us a little bit. was that how it happened, and you kind of had to transition into 3D?
Yeah, I was really reluctant, they did a bit of training with us on at Warner's, because Giant had a major CG character in it. So we did a bit of training, and they offered all of us, to train us up in CG. But I was like, I did it for 2 days and was like, oh no, nobody can animate like this. This is terrible. It's not real animation. So yeah, I sort of stuck with 2D. Like even like I went in development for a bit. But yeah, I guess eventually I sort of saw the writing on the wall. I thought, I might as well learn CG because everything was going CG.
Yeah.
So I did a short in order to learn how to use Maya. So in Maya I was self-taught pretty much, which is a terrible way to learn Maya, by the way. Do not teach yourself because you will learn all sorts of really bad habits.
Yeah. Sadie, I'm being paranoid right now. I'm just gonna do one more check.
Oh yeah, of course.
Sorry, 1 second.
Just make sure you haven't turned it off now.
Yeah, it's back on. It's recording. Everything is good.
That's good.
Yeah, it was very apropos since we're just talking about computers. Yeah. Bad habits in Maya. I have the same. I'm of the same conviction that it's good to have someone who walked the walk and already learned from their mistakes to just kind of like push you forward a bit. And then your first big 3D project, was that Open Season?
Yeah, that was the first 3D film I worked on.
Nice.
Yeah, that's good. Like that was like back then they were still hiring people who only had a 2D reel. I had a 2D reel in my 3D short, and that was enough for them. Like at that point, they were perfectly ready to train people because there just weren't enough CG animators around.
Yeah. And then in terms of transitioning from 2D to 3D, that would be like a beautiful way of doing it because you still get to work with. I know that you prefer to animate animals, or at least you did at the time when you taught us, and then so that would have. How did that transition feel? Was it okay, or was it still like tough?
Yeah, well, it was tough. Like it's it was tough because this was quite early days, and rigs back then were extremely heavy. Which actually, the more I work, the more I think there's only one single factor with the happiness or unhappiness of an animator, and that's how heavy is the rig.
I can relate.
And yeah, back in the day, those rigs weighed a ton. Like I learned a lot of technique, but the show was great. The people were great. Like we had it had such a nice crew, and I made a lot of really good friends there. That was Sony ImageWorks in LA. So I really loved the experience of working on that film. I found it like I still find 2D animation. I've done 2D films since then, and I find it actually more stressful than CG because of the drawing. If you've done 2D, you know that it's the stress of drawing, and the amount of yourself that you put into stuff because you're drawing is so much bigger than in CG, which is a little bit, there's the distance, which is less fun, but I think it's also more sanity inducing in terms of making a living. So I think in the end, I found a comfort level with CG that's nice. So I'm still here.
That's so interesting that I haven't thought of it that way, that the hands-on approach in 2D makes you closer, or because I remember I only had a year of training in 2D in school, but as many others, we prepared by doing like a lot of drawing, and as many others, I had been drawing since I was a kid. So you get to a level where you feel comfortable, albeit not quite good enough you're always limited by your drawing skills when you're animating 2D.
Yeah.
And I presume it would take years and years to get over that. But there's still like an intensity because you're closer and you're actually, maybe it's the physical aspect of it, or it's
I think it's more physical. And I can assure you, nobody ever gets over it. Like nobody ever feels they draw well enough in 2D. Nobody.
No.
I a couple of people who are like, yeah, I totally draw well enough to absolutely nail every single shot I do. But I think for most people, it's the stress of drawing on top of the stress of animating.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's a lot more darlings to kill when you've actually been noodling and you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I can only imagine. And well, uh, after open season, were you just kind of like pursuing 3D from there, or was did is that just what came up?
Yeah, it's kind of sort of what came up. Like I tend to drift from thing to thing. Like I don't have, I'm not one of those people who sets goals and achieves things. Things just sort of so uh, it's I think after open season, I got married, and my husband is British, and
Oh,
I'm a bit sick of LA, and I wanted to travel, so I traveled for a bit, and um, to kind of move to the UK, and um, in the UK, certainly at the time, there was no, I mean, there was very, very little 2D. There wasn't a ton of animation of any kind, but there, like 2D, there was almost nothing except, some ads. So I did some ad work. But then I thought, what the heck, and applied for some VFX stuff, which I'd never done. And I think, thinking back, I think Golden Compass was my first VFX film.
oh,
That was at Cinesite.
mm,
Uh, and as I actually really liked VFX. Like I just as a job, I just really like it. Like the parameters are super clear. Um, it's really interesting problem solving all the time.
mm.
um, and it played to my strengths in a lot of ways. So I just sort of settled into VFX, which is all London was doing at the time anyway. But that's pretty much what I've been doing since then. I think
Yeah.
with some detours, actually a lot of detours, but I keep coming back. VFX is like, oh, I need some money. Oh, into VFX.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have been in that situation. Just like I ran out of money.
Yeah.
But no, and obviously, like you said, besides that, it's like it's a very in a sense, if you know how to do it, it's an easy job to fill to it
Yeah.
until crunch really sets in. Um, uh, you talked a little bit about not having a plan, and
Mm.
I wanted to talk about like different outlets as well, because like we talked about your 2D and 3D and how you have these different strengths. I remember when you taught us in 2D, it's not too long after that I heard someone say that you worked on open season, and I had to kind of like, wait, that's not Sydney, because Sydney draws, and in my mind it's like it at that time, like it was amazing how you could be so good at both because the level is so high. And then I found out about this thing, and turns out you're an amazing writer on top of all that. So you took, how did you take like dedicated time off to, I'll just plug it again. You wrote this amazing comic or graphic novel, Thrilling Adventures of Lovelace and Babbage. Was in it? It came out in 2015, I think.
Yeah. End of 2015 that came out.
Yeah. That was.
Mm.
I think you get to live a lot of animators' dreams by doing your own thing and actually putting it out there. Um,
Yeah. I mean, it was really cool, and that is a very good example of my not having any sort of plan at all. Because I think I'd been doing CG for a while, and I pretty much completely stopped drawing altogether.
mm,
It seemed like a bit of a waste because it's a skill. It takes ages to learn how to draw, and then you're
oh,
like, well, I'll probably use this in some way. So I had this. I think a lot of people were doing web comics at the time, so I should draw a comic. But that comic actually started as a joke. Because I was doing a blog with some very, very, very occasional blogs with some drawings. I think I posted maybe once a month, or if that. And a friend of mine had started this Ada Lovelace Day thing, which it's like a online festival of women in basically. And she essentially asked me, to draw a comic to explain who Ada Lovelace was. We were in a pub and, we were drunk and she was like, you should do a comic. So I literally did the first episode, which I did not know was the first episode of a giant comic, like in one day. I just sat down and sketched it out and I put it on my website. And then because Ada Lovelace Day is all about linking to things, it got linked all over the place. And it was, I think it showed up. I knew I was in trouble when it showed up on Wired online. And it was like, oh, this person is doing this comic about Ada Lovelace, because the joke of the strip was that it was this little biography of this she's a historical person. She died in 1852 or something like that. But the joke in the comic is that she lives and goes on all these adventures and stuff. So so this was I ran it as a web comic for about 3 years or 4 years, I think. Just completely, whenever I had time, I would sketch stuff out and throw it up. Like very, very ugly. If you look at the website, the drawing is hideous. And it was more about joking around and, reading up on her and doing all this research. And so, yeah, I'd done that for about 3 or 4 years. And then I got contacted by a publisher who said, oh, do you want to do this as a book? And I was actually on John Carter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, so I don't mean to stop you. I just want to make sure that we let everyone know who Ada Lovelace and Charles Babbage were.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's a big digression. So Charles Babbage basically was this guy who invented the computer, except it was the 1830s, so they couldn't actually build the computer. And then, but he invented it in theory. And then Ada Lovelace, who was a friend of his, wrote these theoretical programs for this imaginary computer. And then they both died and there was no computer. So it's this sort of sad what if story of history. So the comic is about, they actually built this computer, and it's this steampunk sort of satire of technology.
Yeah.
It was super fun to write. Like when I was doing the comic online, it was just so much fun, because I'd come home from work and I'd just be like, oh, I'm so tired, but I'd still, be excited to just, I'd go straight to the desk and just dash out some comic because I'd had all these ideas. And it was completely improvised and just really, really informal. So that was just, it was just play. Like, I think play is really important in the creative process, and particularly in VFX, we don't really play very much. So it was just this playful thing and a way for me to draw in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so you said you worked on it while you were working on John Carter?
Yeah. Like I did, oh gosh, pretty much every film I was doing, for 3 or 4 years, I was also doing the comic. Like I didn't take off to do the comic. I was just doing the comic. But the book, after John Carter, then I took a year off to do the book.
Right. Okay.
Because I had this publishing contract and I had to actually draw it, because I mean the drawings were super rough. They were also young comic artists. When you're roughing out your comic, even if you have no intention of ever doing a book, do not do them at 72 DPI. I had to redraw the whole thing from scratch.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Well, it looks amazing, and I only got mine 2 days ago, so I haven't gotten too far, but I was just surprised that first of all the writing is hilarious. It's so fun, and then it should go without saying by now that the drawings are beautiful, and but also I was moved by how heavily researched it all is. There's so much built on. And you're, as far as I understand, you're even using quotations as in the actual comic to kind of substantiate these characters, and it's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a little obsessed.
Yeah, I could see that, but it's fun because it's just like it's just this like it's like there's so much there, but it still feels like you're just scratching the surface, which is awesome. Um, and then it came out and it did really well as well, right?
Yeah, like, for a comic about Victorian computing. It's sold really well. Like, my publisher was really thrilled, and I got to go on book tours and do all these talks, and it was, that was definitely completely unexpected. Like, I don't think anyone my publisher definitely did not expect it to do that. I mean, it's not like the thing about writing is, or comics is, unless it's a mega hit,
Mm.
it's there's it's somewhere between beer money and a mega hit is about where that book landed. So, like, it paid off taking a year out of films to do. I made about as much doing that book as I did if I had done a film. So that it was great. Like, it was completely fantastic. Like, it was 100% positive uh,
Yeah.
doing that book. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it must have been. We haven't gotten too far into your experience in VFX, but I can assume this just from looking at my own that there's a lot of that where you follow, like you said, you follow a system and you follow a production and you problem solve. But and then sometimes I should speak for myself now. Like I you could get that feeling of being like a tiny bit in a big popcorn machine, and then
Yeah.
like you just you're
Yeah.
solving and you're pumping out these frames, but they're very very small bits in a big thing,
Yeah.
which can be a blessing and a curse. But then you got to go to the completely other side where I don't know if you had an editor, but it's like it was very much your own project. This one.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much. I mean, I had an editor, which was the late great Dan Frank, who very sadly passed away
Mm.
a few months ago. But he was the guy who published Mouse. He published Persepolis, like,
Oh wow.
titan of comics. But he was super hands off. Like, he was like, you're the auteur. This is your thing. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. But yeah, it was like, I mean, in a sense, like, I'm like I have the soul of a cubicle monkey, which is what makes me really good at. I just, I sit at my desk and people give me shots and I turn them out, and it's nice. Like, what I love about VFX is actually that flow of, you know, you just fall into a shot and you don't have that many decisions to make. Whereas, suddenly you've got this book and you're writing, drawing, researching, designing, like everything.
Mm.
Um, and it was stressful, definitely. And, like, it's also, it's solitary. Like, I'm usually working obviously with, hundreds of people on a show. And this was like, me. So, um, it was pretty much the exact opposite of VFX, in every possible way. So it was also total chaos. Like, I'm quite organized as an animator. You have your plan and you just solve all your problems.
Yeah,
The book was total chaos from beginning to end. So
yeah. Yeah, so I guess in a way you get you get some of that creative freedom, but you also pay in the stress
yeah.
and the yeah, like that yeah, that makes sense that that would be the payoff. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing though, and you made it onto the New York Times best-selling list for quite a while, I think. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
6 months, over 6 months, and
Oh,
then you.
that's amazing. and then back into film.
Yeah. Um,
Mm.
um, uh, I mean, I guess I went off and taught for a while. I've been teaching at a university for a couple of years, but now I'm back in VFX. It keeps sucking me back in.
Yeah, and well, it makes sense, like what we talked about before, and it's especially if it's something that you can balance um, with your other creative outlet, then it
Yeah, I think, life is, it's the older you get, the more you realize ars longa vita brevis, as they say, like the life is short, and art takes forever. So I think, the success of the book was ever so slightly wasted on me, in the sense that there are people for whom that would have been a dream come true, and it would have been like, yes, now I'm going to do a whole series of books and do an IP, and start my lone empire as the creator of this comic. But it's not really, I guess it, just sitting and writing books. I say just sitting and writing books. I don't know. It's not really me. So I like to work on big projects with lots of people and a regular paycheck, which, is probably not, the most glamorous way to be, but it's,
Oh, well, it's like, it seems like maybe it's only until there's another thing brewing under the surface, and then that'll have to happen. Yeah.
I think that's true. Like, I think, like, I think I was seized by the book in a lot of ways. Like, the character sees me in the concepts. I, as anyone can tell, reading the book, this was definitely a labor of love, as opposed to any logical decision. So I think the muse descended, and then the muse was done with me, and it's like, okay, now go back into VFX, and I'm like, all right, that was weird.
That's amazing.
But yeah, that I've done projects, before, like, I did a short film a while back that did some festivals, and then
the agricultural report.
Yeah,
right?
I do tend to sort of drop out of. I go into film, and then I drop out, and then I go back in, and then I drop out, and I do different stuff. So
Yeah. I think I can definitely recognize that, and I think a lot of others can. It's the nature of it. I think I used to be frustrated with it, and then you just have to make peace with how things work, and then it's really nice.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, I really love, I mean, when I graduated, and this doesn't happen anymore, I think, at all. I signed a 5-year contract with Warner Brothers. Like, who the heck signs a 5-year contract now?
Yeah.
And it looking back, it's one of the biggest mistakes I ever made, because Warner's went under, and it wasn't a particularly creative or forward-thinking company, except for Giant, which was an anomaly. So I was sorry. Sorry, it's not formal, hon. Come on in.
Oh,
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
What do you need?
We can edit.
All right, yeah, there you go.
Okay.
All right. Oh, you're arranging food. That's extremely important. He's arranging food. Very, very important. I lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah. So, like, to get locked into a single company like that, what I love about VFX, and, I tend to want to arrange my life so that I can always walk away. If I don't like a situation, I don't like a show, I'm like, you know what, this isn't working.
Yeah.
So that sort of piecework thing, that you're sort of in control of your, life. I quite like that, actually. I just like going from project to project. It really suits me. So
yeah.
And if you finish a project, you're pretty burnt out because it's quite heavy, and then you can say, you know what, I'm gonna take some time off and do some drawing or do something else.
Yeah. That makes sense. That the feeling of being in control, because you can lose it if you get too bucked in.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's not, I think, people are different. Like, some people, they absolutely, love the gig, and they're completely obsessed, and then they, they're completely happy, at a single studio for 10 years. That's also totally fine. So.
Yeah. I've been lucky enough to have quite a few supervisors on here, and they're so good at it because they just love it. And we need all different types, also within animation. So it's cool to see there's different ways of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, You're allowed to have a life and different interests as well.
Yeah. And it's amazing. It's just amazing to see how you've kind of that part unfolded for you as well. You have gotten a little bit more comfortable with management now, right? Because you work as a lead now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a lead now at MPC, so it's like
they finally got you.
I know. It's so much work. Yeah, I mean, it's different. Like, when it's a. I think I am allowed to say it's Lion King 2, which is yeah, which should be an amazing film. It's Barry Jenkins directing, who's unbelievable. So as the industry is completely nuts right now. So it's an opportunity that came up, and it's just an incredible show, incredible director, and you're like, all right, I'll learn new things, and it'll be a learning experience for all of us. But yeah, no, it's I guess I've been a lead in 2D, and I've been asked to lead stuff in 3D before, but I guess if there's a theme to this conversation, it's that like I like VFX for the sort of that flow experience of animating and just sort of settling into shots, and I suppose also the fact that I can reserve brain space for my own work, if you know what I mean. I think VFX in particular is it's a wonderful job. Like, I love the work, but you can also leave it at home.
Yeah.
And then you can go and draw comics or what have you. Whereas I think once you start moving in and getting more involved in the show as a show, then it's really it's definitely taking up a lot more of my head. Now that I'm in a position of responsibility.
Yeah.
Oh God, what are we going to do about that thing?
well, it's kind of like it sounds a little bit like with open season that when you have to make that leap, it seems like it's a good show to do it on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Like I know that you have a thing for horses, but big cats must be quite a treat as well to get really into the mechanics and
all the it's I think anyone who if you saw the first one, just the sheer level of everything is just awe-inspiring, in this it's we're next leveling it on this one. So
yeah. And you get to work with because I know MPC has they see, or maybe it's just my idea of it, that there seems to be a younger group of animators, so you get to both work, and I know you talked a little bit about having done teaching as well, so you have to get to work with the younger generation or the new generation of animators coming up.
Like it's there's so many great great young animators. It's you learn just as much from them as they do from you, if not more. So
yeah. Is that this same motivation that you like that makes you go back and teach?
No, absolutely. Like, I think we were saying before the interview became formal that that I go back every year that I can to teach the animation workshop in Viborg, because it's so inspiring. It just really reconnects you with your love of the art, and see what all these young folks are coming up with. It's it keeps you fresh, I think, teaching.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have because I remember going back and I had the same experience when teaching in Viborg, you get so much from them, that whole you get reignited. Is there anything that you kind of try and stress on them, that you the most important lessons that you try to pass on?
Most important lesson: save your work.
Auto-saved.
Yeah, auto-save. I mean, I think if teaching at the animation workshop, and then certainly at a studio like MPC, super high end stuff. it's not like, other jobs where you have to worry about being motivated, or, it's trying to be less motivated in a sense. Like, people just, especially the young people. I'm old now, so I've been there and done that. So I tend to sort of, stuff washes over me now. But I think young people starting out in the industry, they get so stressed out and take everything so personally, and feel that, oh God, if I screw up this shot, I'm a terrible animator, which makes me a bad person, and I'll never work in. And it's like, nah, we're all screwing up shots pretty much all the time. And if you're a bad animator, you can be an awesome person and also be a bad animator. There's separate things. So I guess it's that distance from your work, I think, is quite important. Especially in this industry, I think people tend to get really stressed and burn themselves out, and put so much of their own self-worth into their work, which is very counterproductive. So I think finding that sort of zen of, oh, isn't that interesting? My shot sucks. What have be done about this situation? Because they're going to need this shot to suck less at some point.
Yeah. I think that's very true. It's like, I remember, like, it's still not easy being in a big room with a lot of important people and then telling you that your shot sucks. And they've gotten better at saying it in a nice way, but those early years, or maybe I was just more sensitive. It's definitely true. It's like, it's important. Did you have that same fear in the beginning, where it was really, like, it was quite nerve-wracking going into dailies?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's and I mean, I certainly remember it, from way back in hand-drawn, just being, trembling in the bathroom, thinking, and I mean, the stress, I think, never goes completely away. I mean, everyone is sort of, you take pride in your work, and I think the one thing you can say about animation is it will always keep you humble. Like, this animation will kick your ass every single day of the week, and if it's not, then you're probably not pushing yourself enough. So I think you have to sort of learn to enjoy that process of making your shot suck slightly less every day.
And I guess if you learn from the beginning to try and have a distance to it, you can appreciate that process, the learning curve, a bit more. Because another thing that I remember from, well, my first production was John Carter, and it was very awe-inspiring to see people like yourself and the army of rock stars on that show, what they did. It was incredible. And still they would complain about, this is not quite what I want, or this is not quite, or they would get a ton of notes and I didn't get it. But then you after a while you start to see that it's a curve and it doesn't really stop, so you might as well settle in and remember that you're a good person.
There's life out there.
So do you have any I know Lion King takes up a lot of your time now. There must have been requests though from after a success like this to try something again. Do you have ideas? Or
I mean, there's I've got so many ideas. I've got too many.
You don't have to reveal them here if you don't want to, but
no, I mean, there's another short I want to make that I've got actually in animatic now. I mean, the problem with shorts is that they all it's like a short film is like a racehorse. They say how do you make $1 million in horse racing? Start with gosh. Short films is the same, it's like, there's no, especially a fairly complex short, you have grants and all this stuff. So at some point I'd like to make another short film. And I've been working on another book for ages, but I don't know, comics take forever, and
yeah, I can only. Well,
I think everything's pretty much on hold. During this show. So
yeah. Do you need to take a break or?
No, not at all. It's just my husband.
Yeah, well, I can if you're gonna do as much research as you did for this one, there's definitely gonna.
Yeah, it's also huge. Like, we hadn't realized it was going to wind up. It's like over 300 pages, which is like a ridiculously amount of pages.
Yeah. Well,
I should write a small book. Write a smaller book. I'll write that down.
Yeah, that must have been that. Like, I know we went about it before, but that must have been nerve-wracking. You talked about the self-investment in drawing, and then I've only written a little bit myself, but that writing for me is like, oh, it's so close to you, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And then in this you have 300 pages of both of those combined heavily, and that must have been a nerve-wracking daily when that came out.
Oh God, yeah, no, it was yeah, I mean, the whole time I was writing it, because it's like a sort of an unusual book as well in a lot of ways, and I had absolutely no idea whatsoever how it'd be received. Like when I put it in the mail, like you take the final draft and you put it in the mail, and you're like, well, there goes the worst book ever written. I was like, are they even going to publish it? That's like crazy, because there's so much wrong with that book. And I think the first review was the New York Times, who slagged it. I was like, and it's funny because when I knew that the first review was going to be the Times, and my publisher was like, don't even worry about it. That they'll never slag off first book by a young writer, and they like completely trashed it. And I was like, no, they're completely right. It's a terrible book. Oh well. But then every other review was great, and it sold really well. And yeah, I guess maybe I practiced distance too much, actually, from working in VFX, because I felt like once I'd written the book, it was sort of not my problem. Not my problem anymore.
Yeah. Well, it becomes its own thing once it's out there, right?
Yeah, there's not much you can do about it.
No. Yeah. I just wanted to mention, I did read that the New York Times review, and as far as I could tell, the biggest criticism was that you took it too lightly and you were too self-deprecating. But it's hilarious when you read the book. So I don't know. I don't agree, but luckily a lot of people don't agree. So
yeah, they didn't get it, but it's all right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like when it was. I mean, I have to say, an experience that I want to get back is actually when I was doing the comic online. It never had a huge readership. Like it was not one of those mega web comics. But what it did have was, it was a cult comic. It was the classic sort of cult web comic. So it had like a little group of people who were super into it, mostly because it's about computing. Like I think every single, person with a PhD in the history of computing was following that blog. And so, they'd come into the comments and they'd say, oh, have you read this or that, or make jokes. And it's that cool, that playful feeling of just improvising and collaborating, in a group, in a little closed group. Like nobody at work knew that I was drawing comics. Like it was completely separate. So it was like my little bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a lovely experience. That's something I'd like to do again, Yeah.
Oh, I bet. And it would also be something to, like, a good advice to pass on to to the younger people that you teach and work with, that it's like it's a good leading by example, by kind of showing that you can be invested in your daily job as a VFX artist, and then you can pursue all these other things on the side.
Yeah. I mean, I'd strongly, I don't have kids or, a life, so that that is a caveat.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I think anyone who can, if you have a personal project that you've always wanted to do, actually my overwhelming advice, if you have a personal project you've always wanted to do it. Do the crap version. Like, when I sat to do the comic, it was the crap version. It was horrible drawing. I would write it like literally at 1 a.m. and then just post it at 1:30 in the morning. To actually make something, even if it's terrible, you're putting something out there, and now there's material.
Yeah.
And then material can start to build. But so long as this stuff is just in your head,
yeah,
you've got to build on. It's you've got to put stuff out there. And I think, and I still suffer from this. Like, I haven't learned anything. I still have, think, okay, I'll do the next thing once it's completely perfect in my head, and then I'll just do the first draft will be the completely perfect version in my head. It'll be this amazing thing. No, it just does not work like that. Like, you write the terrible, the crap all comes out, and then it slowly starts to gel.
Yeah.
But nothing happened until you're actually doing it.
That's it sounds like you took a lot of the VFX iteration business into your other, like, artistic endeavor, because VFX is a lot like, wow, this is really bad, this is never going to be anything, and then 60 versions later, here we are, and then and that's it. Yeah, I was saying to someone just the other day that we're talking about the differences between 2D and 3D. In 2D, it will never be as beautiful as that first rough pencil test. Like that, you're just in the zone and you rough the stuff out, and it's this blur of pencil, and somehow it's just perfect and beautiful. And then everything else is trying not to ruin it too much. But that's 2D. In 3D, it's the exact opposite. Like, you throw out, some step block or like a chess piece pass or something like that, and you're like, what even am I looking at? Then it just slowly gets better and better and better, and you're tweaking and tweaking and tweaking until it's much better than it was. So it's sort of more satisfying, I think, at the end of the day than like that's so interesting. I had no that's funny, because it's like with the pencil test, there's maybe, I don't know what it is, like there's so much left up to the imagination of the viewer, and it often it's on force, or and everything's kind of, but there's a really raw sensation that comes across when they work, that I can imagine you don't want to tie it down too much. As opposed to in 3D, you have to kind of sculpture your way out of that this blockiness.
You're wrangling the curve.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, Sydney, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this.
No, I've been delighted. Thanks for listening to me just babble about stuff too.
No, this is great. I think I got around what I had. Is there anything you would like to add to it?
I mean, if there's, I don't know who's listening to this or watching it.
That's probably what happened. A handful of my family and friends.
Make stuff. Don't stewing stuff in your head. Is much inferior to making. The terrible version that's actually made, is always better than the perfect version that's in your head. That would be my, and that's true of animation or whatever.
And maybe don't have too much of a plan.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
We shouldn't.
Have a terrible warning. Who knows? If I'd had a plan, I'd have a whole series of best-selling books or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, you can't think that way. Well, thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure. Maybe I'll ask you to do it again when Lion King 2 comes out.
Absolutely. It's been
Okay.
delightful.
Thank
All
you.
right. Yeah.